Welcome to the second episode of our new CRE Innovation Series, where we dive deep into the world of commercial real estate innovation. I'm Jamilah Caballero, Customer Success Manager at Altus Group, and I'm very excited to be hosting this episode. In this series, we shine the spotlight on some of the most exciting advancements shaping the commercial real estate industry. And in today's episode, we'll be focusing on appraisal innovation and more specifically around the use of AI in valuations. I'll be speaking with Justin Gohn, principal at Gohn and Company, who has quickly become known as an influencer in this space. He'll share how he became an early adopter, his journey, and where he thinks we're headed. Before we dive in, let me do a brief overview of Altus Group for those of you that are discovering us on YouTube. Altus provides industry-leading technology, advanced analytics, and advisory services for commercial real estate. Our global capabilities help clients manage risk and optimize the performance of their assets. If you're in real estate, you have probably heard of our Argus software brand. Okay, let's get started. Justin, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We're happy to have you. Let's begin with a little bit of background on you. How did you get into the commercial real estate appraisal space?
Yeah, so it was by accident. I think I like to say I was a former English major who became a real estate appraiser on accident. I mean, when I was an undergrad, I didn't know real estate appraiser was a thing, and then I graduated and I'm sort of like looking for something to do with my life. And a friend of mine introduced me to this guy who owned an appraisal company in the city of Philadelphia. So I went and worked for him, why not? And worked there for about 3.5 years. I was a trainee at this point, just learning the business. And then literally the day I got my certification, I decided to go out on my own and start my own company. So I did that. And, I can't believe it. That was 2006. So that's almost 20 years ago now. I don't know where the time went. And I've been on my own ever since. My company is known as Gohn and Company. So it's just my last name, Gohn, Gohn and Company. I'm located in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Now, over that time period, the nature of my business has sort of evolved. When I first started, I certainly did more bank and lender work, whereas these days I focus more on, I guess, what you would call expert witness and litigation support work. Over that time period, I picked up my MAI and SRA designations with the Appraisal Institute. And then I guess about 7 or 8 years ago, I got involved in, I guess, what you would call leadership or service with the Appraisal Institute. I was voted on to the board of directors of the Philadelphia Metro chapter of the Appraisal Institute. And this year in 2025, I'm actually serving as the president of the Philly Metro chapter of the Appraisal Institute. So that's sort of an overview. I mean, listen, none of it was planned, but I think that's probably how life works out for most people, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's so funny. We ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they have no idea all of the different roles that they can play in the world. And it's interesting. I think there's so many people who graduate with one degree and end up in a completely different field. I studied psychology. I don't know how I ended up in commercial real estate, but I love it.
I was going to ask you, was it like on your bingo card to be, 5 years ago to be interviewing some random appraiser in the suburbs of Philly at this point, right?
I'm glad, it wasn't, but I'm glad that it is now. I think it's so interesting when you have a plan and then things change and it always works out for the better, right? Like, would you have guessed 20 years ago when you graduated in 2006 that you'd be running your own company at this scale and having achieved as much as you have? It's amazing.
Yeah, I feel very grateful and fortunate. What can I say?
Yeah, it's nice when you have a plan, but you're flexible with that plan because things can always change. And, you have to be ready and willing to accept the change and try new things, get into new areas. So very cool.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you touch on flexibility. I mean, for real estate appraisers, or just over the last 2 decades, you get different rules and regulations. So you always have to be willing to adapt. And, even for what I do in my business now, where I focus on sort of the expert witness work, when you're on the witness stand and you're under the gun, you have to not take things personally. You have to be willing to be flexible and adapt. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that's a good approach to have for life in general. You'll end up being a lot happier.
Really a great life skill to acquire for sure. So, speaking of flexibility, did you set out to become an AI influencer for commercial real estate? How did this happen?
So, what I would say is I don't necessarily identify as an AI influencer. I guess when I think of a influencer on social media, I almost think of sort of a micro celebrity, somebody with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers. And that's certainly not me. Although I do think it's fair to say that within the appraisal community, people know who I am. They interact with my posts if I have something good to say. And then usually a day or two doesn't go by where I don't have a real estate appraiser from somewhere reaching out to me, whether it's a private message on LinkedIn or they figure out what my email address is and send me an email. And I love that. Usually I'm more than willing to jump on a phone call with somebody. Usually they want to know, like, hey, I don't want to miss the boat here with this AI. How can I use it in my business? And I love having those conversations.
Amazing. I think that there's so much uncertainty around AI, and a lot of people are very apprehensive to it. But the best way to deal with fear is to actually understand what you're looking at, understand the challenges that this thing may be solving for. So I love that you're open-minded and willing to discuss with others, especially unsolicited people who reach out.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the appraisal world has given me so much, and this business, the appraisal business, it really is sort of a mentor and mentee type business. So early in your career, you really count on people that have come before you to take you under their wing and mentor you and show you the ropes. I mean, listen, I've been doing this now for over 20 years, and usually there's not a week that goes by that I don't reach out to one of my mentors and ask them a question or bounce something off them. So if there's any appraiser out there, I'm always more than willing to, jump on a call and talk. To me, I owe that and even more to this profession that has given me so much. And yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. No reason to be fearful about new technology. One of the reasons why I think I've gone down this AI rabbit hole so much, it's just sort of this natural progression where I think all my life I've just been curious, right? And then just having an interest in new technology. And, for me, going back to November 2022 or whenever it was when ChatGPT went viral, it didn't take me long to figure out. And I think a lot of people probably have this experience when I'm playing around with the model a little bit that this is probably going to be a game changing technology. So to me, I'm like, well, listen, I just want to approach this with an open minded, with curiosity, certainly not fear, and let's just see where it takes me. And I think having that approach would benefit a lot of appraisers right now when it comes to this tech.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. So you touched on how you kind of got into AI when ChatGPT came out. At what point did you say, I can use this in my business?
Yeah, so I think right away. So what I thought was interesting is, so first of all, ChatGPT goes viral. So I start an account and I start chatting with it. And I just thought it was amazing that, it was trained on all this data and seemed to have almost all of human knowledge, at its disposal. So, I could have a discussion about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire or whatever it might be. I think, at the time we had a dog that was dealing with some issues and was a little bit sick, and it just seemed to, be able to give us good advice about that. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. It's cool. It's an intellectual curiosity to be able to ask questions about physics or whatever that I don't have a lot of domain expertise in and get answers back, right? So that's nice as an intellectual curiosity, but it didn't take me too long to think, wow, there's definitely business applications with this, and where my mind went pretty early on was, I wonder if there's a way to tie in sort of the intellectual horsepower that these LLMs have to be able to tie that and bring that to bear on my own internal knowledge. So all the appraisal reports that are in my database, sort of train it on that information so I can extract insights from that. So that's where my mind went right away. And obviously we see applications like that now. So I think that was sort of the progression early on.
Always great when you can kind of have that thought leadership and say, well, this is great. Love learning about all the things that I'm not super well versed in. I mean, to be honest, I've used it for my son's soccer drills. In practicing, it's super helpful, but also identifying how it can solve challenges within your business, your industry. It's incredible. I'm a fan. So we recently published an article about Rick's updates to their Red Book. It featured our global subject matter experts like Robbie Tanjung, Tim Comer, Raj Singh, and Nicholas Segal. They shared their thoughts on the changes, and I'd love to hear your reaction to the Red Book updates, specifically around the intersection of AI and new technologies with valuation practices.
Absolutely. So, and I did read the article you're referencing from that all this group put out from your subject matter experts. Found it really well written. In fact, anybody that's tuning into this podcast, I would suggest go read that article. It just does a really good job of sort of framing the discussion and giving a good overview. So I think there's a lot of value in taking a few moments and reading that. What I would say about the Red Book updates or guidelines themselves is I'm very heartened by them. I was really excited to see what came out in the Red Book, because in an alternate universe, it could have went a different way, where maybe guidelines came out where it said, if you're an appraiser or you're a valuation expert, you can't use AI. That would have been a disaster. But that's not what we got. What we got was just really practical, reasonable guidance. Some things that sort of jump out now as we talk, this whole idea that you should have a basic familiarity with the model that you're using. If you're using an AI model, understand its capabilities and have a general understanding of its limitations. To me, that's common sense and is a good thing. Another thing that's pointed out in there is sort of this whole idea of keeping a robust work file. And that's just a really good professional practice to have anyway. So in other words, if you're interacting with an AI model in an assignment you're working on, save all of the information. So if you have all these prompts and all these outputs you're getting from the model, save all of that in your work file. To me, that's work file retention 101. It makes complete sense. The last thing that sort of comes to mind when I think about the new rules and guidelines in the Red Book is this whole idea that if you use an AI model and you get information from it, what you don't want to do is just copy and paste that information into your report. Like, that would be crazy, and nobody should do that. Right. Instead, what it says, which to me is very reasonable, take that information, reason over it, apply your own knowledge and judgment to it, and like synthesize it with your own work. And only then maybe incorporate it into your analysis. So listen, I'm a big fan of these new updates. I think they were really well thought out. I would say that next year, it's no secret that UsePAP is going to be updated. And certainly there's going to be language in there about artificial intelligence. And what I would say to the people working on UsePAP, and I will say this to them, because they're asking for letters from people like myself and whoever else is a stakeholder, is I think they should read what the Red Book has done and use that as their framework.
I completely agree. I'm similar to you. I was a little bit concerned, thinking that maybe they would just kind of like slam down the hammer and say, absolutely not, never, don't use AI, which I do think would be a disservice. When you have advanced technology at your fingertips, you should use it responsibly.
Yes.
And I think they did a really good job of making sure that we're not taking away the human element. You still need to do your job. You still need to rely on your expertise, but this can definitely help you with, with the inputs or the models that you've built in to really drive deeper insights. So
Right. Yeah, and if for some reason there was some guideline that came out, and thank God there wasn't, limiting the use, then think about what type of disadvantage then valuation professionals would have compared to other industries, because other industries aren't slowing down. So,
right. Yeah, and with commercial real estate, it's no secret that it doesn't always move at light speed. So it's nice that we're kind of coming with the times and modernizing along the way with the rest of the world.
that's right.
So where do you see valuations and AI use going in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I almost think about this in two different ways. So, in the first track, I would say, okay, well, how's it being used now? And then how's it going to be used over the short to medium term, right? So maybe the next 2 to 6 years. And then on the other hand, how is it going to be used in the long term? and this gets a little speculative because we don't know how fast the technology will progress, but the long term maybe in 10 or 15 years. So, addressing the first track first, how's it going to be used now? How is it being used now? And the short to medium term. The way I see it being adopted is it's going to be used how it's being used by power users like myself right now already, but it's just going to be more widely adopted. Over the next year, 2 or 3, there's just going to be less friction involved in using an AI model in what you do. It's going to become omnipresent. It's just going to become woven into the fabric of all the software applications you use anyway, right when you boot up your computer. And what AI is good at right now, sort of from a high level view, is it's good at taking sort of unstructured information and then structuring it for you. So for example, abstracting a lease agreement. That can be a time consuming process. If you have a 75 or 100-page lease agreement that has, a detailed rent schedule in there, it can take a pretty good amount of time to take that lease agreement and then create, a detailed lease abstract that's coherent and makes sense. Well, that 45 or 50-minute job with AI is now a 3 or 4-minute job. Parsing and extracting information from a zoning code. Some zoning codes can be pretty complicated. Some are easy, but some of them, can be a little bit complicated. And I don't know. I mean, you could spend 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes or more trying to get your arms around what's in this zoning code and then maybe putting it in a table that sort of is coherent and makes sense to your client. Well, that 30-minute or so job is now a 3-minute job. Some other examples obviously would be like data analytics. AI is very good if you have a data set, maybe it's a whole bunch of comparable sales or comparable rentals. You upload it to an appropriate AI model, and it's good at extracting insights out of there. Maybe doing a multiple regression analysis for you, creating charts and visuals that you can incorporate into your appraisal, whether it's a scatter plot with a trend line, it's sort of up to your own creativity. Now, in terms of the long-term view, again, this is where the timelines get a little speculative, but the way I see it is I imagine the appraiser of the future sort of as this master conductor or coordinator. So when a new appraisal comes in, the appraiser will sort of manage and coordinate this team of autonomous AI agents or AI bots. So a new assignment comes in and you might coordinate or ask a group of autonomous AI agents to go do the property inspection for you. Only they won't be inspecting the physical property. They'll be inspecting a digital twin of the physical property. And that's going to become more omnipresent where physical real estate will have a digital twin. And that digital twin will be updated weekly, maybe even daily, depending on, how sensor technology progresses. So, your AI agents will go out and do the property inspection for you, report back to you, give you a little property description. At the same time, you'll ask another group of AI bots to maybe go out and find comparable sales for you. They'll go out and identify potential comparable sales. They'll verify the details of those comparable sales by communicating with the AI agents that are working for the broker who sold that particular comparable sale. So your job is like this master orchestrator commanding these bots, and they're reporting back to you. And then you're assembling the appraisal report as the elite knowledge worker, the one who can exercise judgment, as the one who's capable of sort of this higher level cognitive reasoning and this abstract thought. You're putting together the appraisal report and communicating it to your client in a way that makes sense to them.
That exciting future. Think about all the time that you could save, all of the extra work that you could, there are projects that you want to do, you proactively want to, go through, but you don't have the time. Imagine all you can do if you had the AI bots to do so much of this work and you're still putting in your own experience and your knowledge into it, but not having to do all of the legwork.
Right.
I mean, it's a game changer.
I think so. And actually what I think now, I do have people that disagree with me, a friend of mine who disagrees with me on this one point, but I think this is what'll happen. So I think when this happens, when we have these autonomous AI agents working on our behalf, I think it'll actually, somebody might naively think, well, that means appraisals will get done quicker, fees will go down, and there'll be less work for everybody. I actually think the opposite will happen. I actually think it'll drive demand for more appraisals, because now stakeholders, portfolio managers, maybe instead of getting updated valuations every quarter, maybe now they want updated valuations every month or every week or maybe even every day, so you can find out hidden risks in the system before they build up. We have insight into the bond market and the stock market because these are liquid markets that trade almost on a daily basis, except for like weekends and holidays. But the real estate market, as we learned in the global financial crisis, sometimes hidden risks can build up. And then, it can, end up being disastrous like it was in 2008. So stakeholders might, want more up-to-date valuation. So I actually think that appraisers might be busier than ever. It's just the nature of our work will change. We won't have to do a lot of that data grunt work. We're going to be able to pour all our energy into more creative work, those higher cognitive tasks, highest and best use analysis, things of that nature.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it is easy to first be concerned that, okay, now that now that we have AI doing the work, then I won't have enough. But you're right, it leaves the door open for you to do more and you have more time to do it. And I think, as you said, as investors learn about the ease and the speed of which things can get done, there will be an interest for more regular valuations and appraisals. So.
Right. Yeah. And we see this, in other industries, so to speak, I guess. I mean, as back when the internet first came about, there were dial-up modems, but as internet connectivity got faster and cheaper, that drove more internet use. Same thing with cloud storage. As cloud storage got cheaper and more affordable, cloud storage has become more omnipresent and more popular. So, there's a lot of examples of this, and I think it's exactly how it's going to play out.
I hope so. I think the same. I hope we're both right. So, how do you use AI in your day-to-day?
Yeah, sure. So some of the things that I touched on just there, there's just a lot of low hanging fruit out there that doesn't require a lot of technical skill. So when I've been asked more and more lately to give, webinars and presentations. I just spoke at an Appraisal Institute conference in Florida, in Clearwater, Florida. And what I focused my presentation on for a half hour or so was just some of the low hanging fruit and easy things that you can do right now. So I do some of that stuff, even as a power user. So again, abstracting a lease agreement, why not save, 40 minutes? You turn a 45-minute job into a 4-minute job. Parsing and extracting information from a zoning code. And it generalizes to other tasks that look like that. So as real estate appraisers, how often do we get a rent roll from a client that it can be, it can be a dense, complicated rent roll. It's just really disorganized. It might not be in a format that we would want to put in our report. Well, oftentimes that could be a somewhat time consuming process, taking this large, disorganized rent roll and then organizing it in a format that's a little bit more intelligible. So then you can present it in your appraisal report. Well, that long time consuming task is now a 2 or 3 minute task, thanks to AI. So a lot of things look like that. Again, data analytics, it's very good at. So, if I have, any particular data set, again, it could be a whole bunch of comparable sales. AI is very good at extracting insights out of that, creating visualization. So I can communicate better to my client if there's some type of chart or graphic that I want to create. With AI, it's just a question away. Sort of moving up the complexity scale a little bit, there's this emerging framework over the past several years known as retrieval augmented generation. It goes by the acronym of RAG, R-A-G. And I'm going to give a high level view of what it is. And, I'm sure there's some machine learning researcher somewhere who'll be pounding the table saying, I'm oversimplifying this, but just for the purposes of our discussion, what you do with RAG is you take a powerful LLM, and there's a way to do this privately and securely. I'm sure we'll touch on that later, but you take a powerful LLM and you plug it in to your internal data. So for a real estate appraiser, that would be your internal corpus of knowledge. That would be your appraisal reports, all the appraisals you've done over the years, market studies, whatever else you had. You plug an AI model into that, and then you can have a conversation with your data. It just makes retrieving data from your internal knowledge base that much easier. It makes extracting insights that much easier. It's just a much better way of extracting information from our internal corpus of knowledge much more efficiently than how we interact with databases now. So that's RAG. And then the last example I would give you, again, this is going up the elevator of complexity here, would be something called fine tuning. Now, with fine tuning, what you do is you take an open source AI model, usually, and you save it so it becomes yours. You could save it in a cloud environment, or if you have a powerful computer, you can save it locally. And again, for lack of a better word, just keeping it simple here, you train that AI model on your internal data. So if you're an appraiser, that's all the appraisal reports and anything else you have in your files. You train the AI model on that data so that you're sort of infusing your knowledge into the DNA of the AI model. So again, this is just a way where then it becomes very easy to communicate with your information, to extract insights, to find hidden connections in your internal data that maybe you never knew existed. What I would say on this point is, as we're talking right now, earlier, I read a report that McKinsey, the consulting group, they're using RAG and fine tuning internally. They have an internal AI chatbot that they called Lily, I believe it's called Lily. And from what I understand from the news reports, the people that work at McKinsey, like 70% of them apparently are using this AI chatbot and love it and interact with it every day, and is getting very high marks. And there are other companies that are doing this as well. Morgan Stanley is doing this. There's a law firm called Dentons, which is one of the world's largest law firms, and sort of the list goes on and on. And again, this is a big time saver because you're able to extract data from your internal corpus of knowledge so much more efficiently than ever before. So this is a good high level view of things that I'm doing right now.
Which is amazing because then that means that you have less time that you're spending on the cumbersome and manual effort aspect of your job, and you can focus more so on, like you mentioned earlier, the storytelling of the data,
Right.
effectively communicating what you're seeing.
Right.
I think that's wonderful.
That's a great point. And I love how you use the term storytelling, because that's exactly what it is. Again, this is this higher cognitive work, sort of this bottoms up thinking that only humans can do. I mean, AI does a lot of good things very well. It can't write like, Ernest Hemingway or Maya Angelou, right? I mean, this is the stuff that's the domain of the human, but we can offload, again, sort of that data grunt work, onto the AI models. And listen, as somebody listening to this, as I just went through all that, like RAG and fine tuning, if you're not a very technical person, that may seem like, oh, this is so complicated, I'm just not even going to bother. But what I would say is, pay attention to what I said before that, sort of the low hanging fruit. This is what I go over often in my presentations. It's so easy out of the box to use an AI model to abstract a lease agreement for you, to help organize a rent roll, to parse and extract information from a zoning code. And you can see real time savings there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely true. So for you, with your current use of AI, do your clients know that you use AI,
Oh, absolutely.
or how do you use it?
Yeah, definitely. So anytime AI will play any type of role in any appraisal that I'm doing, it gets disclosed. And I mean, I think this is nothing new for a real estate appraiser or for real estate appraisals. I mean, going back decades, if you were to look at most appraisal reports, there's usually a section somewhere in everybody's appraisal report where, you talk about what data sources you use. For example, you might say, well, I investigated, US Census Bureau data, or I use Site to Do Business. Well, this is nothing different. So if it gets used, it gets disclosed. And yeah, I mean, I haven't had any clients, show any concern over that at all. I mean, ultimately, I think what my clients are concerned about is the report that I'm delivering to them, the credibility of it. And, Am I, like you say, am I telling a story in my appraisal? Does it have a beginning, a middle, and an end? And does everything logically follow? And is it well supported?
Makes sense. So it sounds like there's not a lot of concern expressed for your clients when it comes to using AI.
None of my clients, although I have seen some stuff, on LinkedIn just here and there where where people are reporting that they have clients. Now, I don't know who these clients are. I haven't, found that out, but reporting that clients are mandating that, AI models are not used by their appraisers. So I don't know if this is coming from AMCs or certain banks and lenders, so all I can speak to is my clients, and those that I work for. And I think those that are putting those types of limitations on appraisers, they're going to have to drop those type of requirements pretty soon because again, this technology is just going to be used, omnipresently. So I think, if people have that type of requirement, that's going to be dropped pretty soon.
Well, that's good. Hope you're right. So, how do you address concerns regarding accuracy and transparency in valuations with the use of AI?
Absolutely. And I think questions should be asked about accuracy and transparency, frankly. I think that's a healthy sign of our community to show skepticism. What I would say is this is it's becoming increasingly easier to verify information that an AI model gives you. Now, we all know, we've all heard, even if you're a beginner with AI models, we've all heard of this term hallucination, where AI models can just make stuff up, right? And we can't have that. But it's becoming easier and easier to double check things. So, for example, from my perspective, one of the most useful AI tools that has been released to date, sort of out of the box that anybody can use right now, is the deep research tool by ChatGPT. Now, with this deep research tool, you can give it a topic, any topic you can think of. It'll go out on the internet, it'll do research for you, and then it'll come back and it'll write a very detailed report for you with sources. So, for example, if I say, you know what, go out and do some research and write a report for me on the office market in Center City, Philadelphia. It'll go out and do research and come back and write a detailed report for me. And every claim that it makes in that report, it backs up with a source. So, for example, if I'm reading a report and it says something like, I'm just making this up, vacancy rates in Center City, Philadelphia in the office market are at 15%. Well, it'll back that up with a link to its source so I can follow that link. And maybe it takes me to a Cushman and Wakefield report or a JLL report so that I can double check what it is. So, you don't just have to take his word for it. This goes back to the Red Book rules of being able to reason over the data and double check it before you use it. So the friction in being able to do that is being removed because you can check these sources. Listen, what I would say is this. It's like collaborating with another human. If I have a junior appraiser working for me, or say a senior analyst working for me, and I give them a task, say I get an assignment to appraise a hotel, and I say, okay, I'm going to work on this stuff over here, and I tell my junior appraiser or analyst, while I'm doing this, go out and put together a 6-step market analysis for me, right? They go out and do that and come back 2 or 3 days later. Well, what do I do then? Well, I'll tell you what I don't do. I don't just copy and paste what they've given me and put it in my appraisal. I mean, it's pain. So even with a human, what I do is I take that information, I read over it, I verify it, I have it back and forth with my human colleagues. So I treat it the exact same way. The way I think of an AI model is as it's a first year analyst. It has unlimited energy and I give it zero license.
That's the perfect way of putting it. It is like having an analyst in your pocket that never sleeps.
That's that's exactly right.
Yeah, that's funny. I was thinking the exact image as you were saying it at the same time. But
Yeah.
even
No, so it's good to have these concerns. And
Mhm.
I would be worried if the appraisal community didn't have these concerns in this type of robust debate. But let's also not lose sight of the fact of how we interact with these things. You
Mhm.
treat it like that first year analyst. You give it zero license and you verify everything that it's done. Again, similar to how you would work with a human that you were working with.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so on that note, We know that you're using AI. Do you know if other appraisers are using AI?
Yeah, definitely there are. And I talk to a lot of them. So I would say there's a spectrum here.
Mhm.
There are appraisers who, are just maybe using it a little bit. Maybe it's helping them, maybe it's late in the day and they have a little brain fog and they need help drafting an email. So they're just using something simple like that, all the way up to power users such as myself and sort of everything in between. There are certainly appraisers out there who rely heavily on data analytics. That's the way they approach their art. They'll use tools like multiple regression analysis, and AI models are very good for that. ChatGPT right out of the box is good for that. And then there are standalone tools like Julius AI that I know a lot of appraisers who are more into data science will use. So I think there's a spectrum of use there. And like I said, it'll continue to be adopted more and more as the friction is removed.
Right. I mean, I think even at the very least, AI is great to help reduce like human error and identify trends and inconsistencies within your data. So even if you're not trusting it to draft a report, you can certainly use it to validate or verify the information that you're presenting as well.
I'm actually so glad you brought that up because I sort of forgot about this. But one thing that you can do, and again, you can do this privately and securely, is you can use an AI model to sort of QC your report before you send it out to a client. Obviously, every appraiser, before we send a report out to our clients, we review it ourselves. We do a line by line review, but we're humans. We're not perfect.
Right.
Even the Michael Jordan of appraisers out there, right, will send out a report that might have a few errors in it, whether they're typing
Mhm.
or whatever it is. So, that can happen to all of us. What AI is good at is finding that. So, before you send a report out, you can have an AI model internally do a review of it. And, if you had one digit wrong on the parcel number on page 43, it's going to find it. If you say in your report, oh, I adjusted sale number one downward for building size because of this reason, and maybe you didn't actually make that adjustment in the adjustment grid, it'll pick that up. So yeah, there's all these great ways that it can be used, and that's a really good use case that you pointed out.
Great minds, same page. So, I recently saw your post on LinkedIn about how appraisers shouldn't be worried about artificial intelligence. Can you explain this to our audience, what you meant by that?
Absolutely. So listen, if you're out there and you're a real estate appraiser listening to this, don't worry about AI taking your job. Please don't do that. It's just not going to happen. And the reason why are some of the things I touched on previously. AI is good at doing a lot of that, again, sort of data grunt work. What it can't do is sort of bottom up thinking that humans can do, abstract reasoning, these higher cognitive tasks that only we're capable of. Things like what is the real highest and best use of this property? An AI model is not going to be able to determine that. Listen, the first step in the appraisal process to a lot of people is identifying the problem, right? That's a non-trivial task. And it's the first step to identify the problem. There are a lot of junior appraisers with 5 or 6 years of experience with a lot of appraisal assignments that are a little more complicated, aren't able to identify the problem correctly. And that's the very first step. They rely on more senior appraisers and their mentors to help them out. And listen, if you extend the timeline out far enough, is it possible that AI models can get this capability where they're going to be able to, think abstractly and reason and use judgment like humans? Maybe. Um, what I will say is that there are people who argue different sides, people at the top of, of the AI world, so to speak, like machine learning researchers and AI researchers. Some say yes, and then some say, no, it'll never happen. So the point is, we're not there now. We're probably not going to be there for a number of years. So please don't worry about this. Look at it as a tool, sort of a force multiplier that's here to help you.
Right. So it's more like AI can do the heavy lifting so that way you can focus on the higher cognitive task, as you mentioned.
100%.
And then it seems like there's always a concern about data privacy when AI enters the picture. What do you say to those that have concerns over client privacy?
So I would say to them, thank God that you have concerns over client privacy. It would seem to me of all the things in the available universe that we care about as real estate appraisers, client privacy and data security should go to the front of the line. You know what I mean? Like we start with that, right? And then we worry about everything else. But the good news is there are ways, very easy ways to use these AI models and incorporate them into your business while maintaining client confidentiality and client privacy. Again, what I would say is, as you and I are talking right now, there are almost countless examples of businesses in other sectors that are right now using AI models in their business while keeping client information secure. Just look at the legal profession. There's so many law firms right now, including some of the biggest in the world, that are using AI models. Law firms care deeply about client confidentiality, yet they're able to incorporate this technology while keeping client data secure. I brought up McKinsey. You think McKinsey's interested in leaking their own private internal data to people? No, they don't want to do that. They're using AI technology securely. And listen, just to put a fine point on it, what about the healthcare sector? Hospitals and other companies in the healthcare sector are using AI models right now, and they have HIPAA compliance. The last thing a hospital wants to do is leak patient information, right? But yet they're doing it. They're successfully using this new technology. So my message to the broader appraisal community is if these other businesses can do it, so can we.
And we just have to create the safeguards, and we have to put the safeguards in place.
Absolutely.
Earlier, you mentioned how some appraisers will draft emails using ChatGPT. I'm guilty of it. And I always make sure to replace maybe the client name or the software or the solution with ABC in all caps. That way I remember to change that.
Right.
But yeah, there's definitely things that we can all be doing to make sure that we're protecting our data and our client data as well.
Right. And, some examples are a lot of these frontier models. You can get accounts if you're a business where they give you privacy assurances right in their terms of use. So ChatGPT through OpenAI, they have an enterprise plan. It's not terribly expensive. Anthropic has an enterprise plan. Even Anthropic's Teams plan, they call it, has like SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, end-to-end encryption. So a lot of these frontier models, if you contact them, it's very easy. You can get, some of these assurances. And then obviously it's really not that complicated. You can run open source AI models locally on your own infrastructure. I know to some people that might sound like it's crazy, but it's not. It's really easy to do. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of safeguards you can put in place. And listen, just what you said is a great example of drafting the email and making sure that you're not putting any confidential information in there. Say you are an appraiser and you're just getting started and you don't have an enterprise plan yet with one of these frontier models, and you want to take advantage of time savings with abstracting a lease agreement, right? Well, you don't want to just upload the lease agreement to a model without these privacy securities. Well, what you can do is you can make a copy of the lease agreement locally, right? And then go through and take 5 or 6 minutes and redact all the confidential information. So you're anonymizing it. I mean, even in a 100-page lease agreement, a lot of the confidential information, like the property address, the parties to the lease agreement, usually that only shows up in a few spots. So you can go through, redact all of that, completely anonymize the data, and then, get a lot of the information abstracted for you. So there's different things like that you can do. Ultimately, I think what people should do is get an enterprise plan. It's not terribly expensive. And then, you're good.
The races.
That's right.
So what other technologies or innovations are you taking advantage of these days?
Yeah, so there's a lot of like legacy software that I use. It's just been around for a while. I think somebody once said, oftentimes the simplest tool is the best. So I run my company from Google Workspace, so that's cloud storage with Google. That's Gmail, right? With my company's domain, that's Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Forms, I use Zapier, which helps automate different workflows. I use Airtable. Airtable is a very robust cloud-based database. I find it's very good as a database for my sales comps. And then Trello. I don't know what I'd do without Trello. Trello is sort of like a digital Kanban board, and it helps me it's for project management. And it helps me keep track of all the appraisals I currently have and where they are in the completion process. So I think that's a good high level view.
A good project management system tool. And now they're building AI into them. So like if you have maybe a multi-stage or multi-phase project or several projects, you can build the if then analysis, or I'm sorry, if then inputs, and then once you complete one, it brings the task over to the next phase or stage, and it just makes life so much easier, and I don't have to worry about the admin tasks. It's really nice.
And this is where we go back to how the friction in using these models is going to be abstracted away. It's just going to be integrated in everything we use.
Yeah, definitely agree. So we're coming to an end. If you had one piece of advice for the industry, what would it be?
Advice. So what I would say is this, just don't be afraid. Like, don't be fearful of AI. It's not coming to take your job.
Mm-hmm.
And also, don't fall into this trap that happens to real estate appraisers, and I don't know why, of adopting what I would call sort of a scarcity mindset. This whole idea that there's only, so many resources out there. There's only so much money to be made, and if I don't grab what's mine right now, then I'm going to miss out. It's just really not how the world works. We live in a much more abundant world than that. And most of all, what I would say is try to get comfortable with the idea that as real estate appraisers, our best days are ahead of us.
It makes me think about the book. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the author, but I think it's The Millionaire Mindset. And he talks, and also The Psychology of Money. A lot of finance books, I'm sure. Right, your bill?
Great book.
Yeah, it sure is. But I mean, they all have the same theme of remove your scarcity mindset. You have to have an abundance mindset. And you said both of those words so very clearly. It really spoke to me. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was great. This is a lot of fun here. I enjoyed this talk.
I'm so glad. So did I. So my takeaway from this discussion is that AI isn't here to replace valuation professionals, but it is here to support us, help us to save time, and focus on what really matters, which is our judgment, our insights, and our relationships with our clients. And honestly, that's something that no machine could do or replace us.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us in the second episode of our new CRE Innovation Series. We hope you enjoyed this session on appraisal innovation and the use of AI in valuations with Justin Gohn. If you found this discussion insightful, be sure to like and subscribe. We'd love to hear your thoughts and any questions you might have, so feel free to leave them in the comments below. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue to explore innovation in CRE.